Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Week 14 Highlight Haven NFL Tailgate Show. I'm your host, Matthew Heiserman, and today we are joined by Josh Wolver of Josh's Sports Report to preview each and every game heading into Week 14 of the NFL season. Josh, it's great to have you on.
Thanks so much for having me on, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, we will be taking callers throughout the stream as usual, so feel free to call in using the link in the chat. I will also be watching the chat if you have any questions during the stream. With that being said, we have a great week ahead of us, so let's jump right into it. Starting with Browns at Steelers. Steelers 6.5 point favorites. They're 9-3 on the year. The Browns are 3-9. George Pickens is out in this game. Now, the last time these two teams faced off was, I believe, 2 weeks ago. Obviously,
Mhm.
Thursday Night Football. It was that snowy matchup. The Browns ended up taking the victory in that game. Does that happen again in this one?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think certainly these are both hard-nosed teams, and they both love the cold weather. But I do have the Steelers in this one. I think the Browns have the ability to keep it close. It's really an any given Sunday with Jameis Winston. He's just a guy that can go out there and supply you with a three-touchdown, 400-yard performance one day, and then go out there and throw for 150 the next day. So it really depends. This is an unreliable Browns team, as opposed to a Pittsburgh team that's hit their stride with Russell Wilson 44 a week ago against Cincinnati. So I do think that the Steelers come away with this one, but boy, they've got a tough schedule recently. This is going to be their fourth divisional matchup in a row. They have the Ravens, Browns, Bengals, and then back to the Browns here. So a tough stretch for Mike Tomlin. They've proven what they can do by winning two out of those three, though their only loss was to these Cleveland Browns. But I do have Pittsburgh winning, I'll say by 6.
Yeah, I mean, all in all, other than that Cleveland game, Pittsburgh has won 6 of their last 7 games, and the Browns average just 87 rushing yards per game, which is the third fewest in the NFL. We saw Nick Chubb come back. We expected him to do big things. He hasn't really done that great since his return. Obviously, still probably dealing a little bit with that major injury he suffered last season against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Russell Wilson 5-1 as the Steelers starter, and he's played at a near MVP level throughout his past few games, if you ask me. Najee Harris has averaged 98 scrimmage yards per game in his past 7 games to go along with 4 touchdowns. I have the Steelers in this one as well. I just don't see them getting swept by Cleveland this season. I honestly don't have this one being close. I don't think the Browns are going to keep it close, and the Steelers will take care of business at home, covering the spread. Now, moving over to the next game, we have Saints at Giants. Saints 4 point favorites. They're 4-8 on the year. Giants are 2-10. Two really struggling teams going against each other. However, the Saints are 2-1 under head coach Darren Rizzi. New York has lost 5 straight games. And the Giants average 183 passing yards per game, which is the second fewest in the NFL. They average 15 points per game, which is the fewest in the NFL. And they allow 146 rushing yards per game, which is the fourth most in the NFL. That's obviously not going to go well playing against Alvin Kamara, who's one of the better running backs
Mhm.
in the league. Derek Carr hasn't thrown an interception in 4 straight weeks. And then obviously MVS, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, in his past 3 games has averaged 77 receiving yards and has a total of 4 touchdowns. Despite being an extremely boring game overall, I do have the Saints coming out on top in this one and advancing their record to 5-8, while the Giants fall to 2-11.
Yeah, honestly, I think you're right. This is one of the worst games of the week. And honestly, this is a game that the Giants could have end up winning and hurting their draft stock. There's a lot wrong with the Giants. I think it's going to be Drew Lock at quarterback today, but whoever it is, there's a lot of problems there. Defensively, they can do good things against a pretty low power New Orleans offense, but when Alvin Kamara gets going, Alvin Kamara gets going. The problem is for New Orleans is that they've struggled in the second half. When I was sort of doing my homework about this game, I was looking into what Darren Rizzi was thinking, and I noticed that over the past 10 games, they've recorded one score on an opening drive of the third quarter. So they have not been good to begin second half, and it was a field goal versus the Panthers, if you're wondering. So That's obviously an area where they need to get better second half offense, but I think that they jump out to an early lead, keep it going against the Giants. I do think that the one thing New York can hope for if they're looking for a win in this game is some defensive takeaways. I don't think their offense is good enough, to score more than 10, maybe 13 points. So defensive takeaways will be huge. If the Giants can play complementary football, I think their defense is the only shot to keep them in this thing. Don't expect a lot of fireworks for this one. I'll take New Orleans by a touchdown.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you said there. Next game is obviously your team, Jets at Dolphins. Luckily, the Commanders are on a bye this week. I don't have to go through the stress of watching them play. Scott Hansen gets my undivided attention for 7 straight hours. It's going to be a great day of red zone. Dolphins are 5.5 favorites in this one. They're 5-7 on the year. Jets are 3-9. Brees Hall obviously out with a knee injury. They will be relying on Braylon Allen as he's starting running back in this game. Josh, you're the Jets fan. I'll let you get it started.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure, along with Brees Hall, let me double check this real quick, that Sauce Gardner is also officially inactive. So there are problems all over the place. Brees Hall and Sauce Gardner. That is
Yeah,
not a
yeah.
combination of guys you want to see on the inactive
Not
list heading into a Jet game. But 5.5 point favorites for the Dolphins. I'll tell you right now, as a Jet fan, that should be higher. I do have Miami winning by uh, probably double digits. I just don't think Aaron Rodgers in the offense. They've shown it time and time again they're not good to compete with other high level offenses. And that's one that I'm pretty high on Miami when Tua is healthy, when they can get things going. I think that despite Sauce Gardner out, the Jets secondary might be able to contain the deep ball, but I think Miami can just kill them all day with the underneath stuff, with the 10-yard slant to Tyreek Hill and he turns it into 30. I'm not sure that, you know, Jalen Waddle or whoever Tyreek Hill working on DJ Reed. I think that's honestly the Jets could see that as a favorable matchup because DJ Reed can defend well against the deep ball, even if it's a guy like Tyreek Hill. But I just think Miami's just going to take advantage of how weak the Jets are and how weak they have been at the line of scrimmage. They haven't been getting pressure lately. I think Tua will have all day to sit in the pocket and do what he wants. But I think if the Jets want to, their front four is going to be the difference in this game. Can Hassan Reddick, can those guys up front, Solomon Thomas, can they penetrate and make Tua, force him to make quick decisions, flush him out of the pocket, obviously. Uh, he's not the best runner when his legs are going. So you got to flush him out of the pocket for the front four and for the Jets. And offensively, obviously, this is a game where I'm expecting a lot of Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson to be working, and I'm expecting screen passes. I'm expecting a lot of timing routes down the field. Even if it didn't work last week, I don't think Aaron Rodgers is afraid to go back to it because when you've got two rookie running backs behind you in the backfield in Isaiah Davis and Braylon Allen, I'm not sure how much the Jets are going to rely on them as much as they would on Brees Hall to make a second long into a third and manageable. I'm not sure how much interim head coach Jeff Ulbrich can rely on those guys to do that. So with that being said, it's going to be a lot of the passing game for both teams. I just think Miami's stronger. They can outwit the Jets. I think they have more stamina and more strength. I'll take Miami by 10.
when it comes down to it, honestly, you mentioned that DJ Reed maybe versus Tyreek matchup, and Tyreek this season has been a long play guy. He's gotten a few long plays, and if he's not getting a long play in a game, which he hasn't in most games, then
Mhm.
he doesn't really do anything that game. I
Yep,
feel like Tua has failed to get him the ball in just a normal situation. You mentioned those, 10-yard passes that could turn into 30. We've seen he'll do that in the past. He hasn't really done it this season.
I
This
agree.
has just
Mike
been a
McDaniel's scheme just hasn't
yeah,
been as good.
this has been an overall bad season for Tyreek. Now, on the other hand, A-Chain has been really good. He's averaged
Right.
92 scrimmage yards in his past 6 games to go along with 7 touchdowns in those 6 games. The Jets are terrible. They're 1-8 in their last 9 games, which I know their record sucks, but I mean, 1-8 in their last 9 games is even worse than
Mm.
what their record shows right now. They average 87 rushing yards per game, which is the fourth least in the NFL. And I mean, with Brees Hall injured, New York's run game is going to be really, really ugly in this one. Tua in his past 3 games has thrown 9 interceptions to 0 touchdowns. Jonnu Smith in his past 3 games
Wow.
has averaged 100 receiving yards with 3 total touchdowns. Even if Tyreek isn't getting involved, even if Waddle's not getting involved, which I know he actually did 2 weeks ago, they still have other options. They still have a lot of other options, and I know you mentioned Garrett Wilson. I'm not as high on him. He's averaged just 33 receiving yards in his past 3 games. So yeah, he is due for a big game, but I don't know if it's going to come in this one. I think that the Jets could keep it fairly close in the first half, but I do have Miami running away with it in the second half, picking up the win at home, covering the spread, probably double digits in my opinion as well.
Yeah, I agree, and I just wanna add in there that the last time the Jets were in Miami last season, I wouldn't say I had the pleasure. I did. I did fly down to Miami for the game, to watch the Jets lose 30 to nothing and to hear a lot of Dolphins fans clowning on me. So, let's see if the Jets can avenge themselves, but I doubt they do. Miami still holding on to playoff hopes for dear life. Let's go to another Florida team. That's the Jacksonville Jaguars and Tennessee Titans. You talked about the Saints Giants game being pretty boring. I think this one might top it for boring game of the week, with Trevor Lawrence out for Jacksonville, obviously after that ugly injury. Uh, it's just going to be the Tony Pollard show for Tennessee. I think he has a monster game in this one. He's had great games
Yeah.
in the past weeks multiple times. Tennessee comes off that win against Houston, and obviously, they haven't been playing well this season. They get clowned on by Washington, 42-19. Matt, you know all about that one. You watched all
Yeah.
4 quarters of it. Your 2 second summary is that they never stood a chance. And then
Yeah.
when you look at things from the Jacksonville side of things, without Trevor Lawrence, I get it. You played well against Houston to keep yourself in it, but let's trace back a little bit. I mean, 52-6 against the Lions. You put up a 7 spot against the Titans at 12-7, and then you kept it close with the Eagles. I just don't see them doing anything with Mac Jones under center. I guess give me the Titans. It's at home. It's in Tennessee, but these are going to be two really bad teams. Maybe like a 3-point win for Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean, I was torn on this game too, and obviously not because it's 2 competitive teams for the exact opposite reason. Who's gonna score a field goal and who's gonna get 0 points? I don't know. That's the question for this game. Mac Jones will obviously be starting, as you mentioned. He played solid last week in the time that he
Agreed.
was out there, but I don't see that again. It's the same thing we saw with Jameis Winston. He went out there in that first game, threw like 3 touchdowns against the Ravens, picked up the win, and he sucked the next game. It's gonna be the exact same thing for Mac Jones, in my opinion. Titans allow just 172 passing yards per game, which is the fewest in the NFL, and the Jaguars allow 273 passing yards per game, which is the most in the NFL. And obviously, you kind of touched on that game last week, the dominating win for the Commanders, obviously. But one thing I will say is that Will Levis had some solid throws. He fumbled the ball. He didn't throw an interception. He did fumble the ball again, but 2 touchdowns, had some really nice throws down the stretch, a lot of arm strength that you could clearly tell. He had some good accuracy. I don't hate Will Levis as a quarterback. I think he's a very solid young quarterback, depending on the situation. Not always. Some games he looks terrible, and I think other games, at least not when you look at the stats, not when you look at the team record,
Mm,
but if you specifically look at his power and accuracy, some games he doesn't look like a terrible quarterback.
Yeah, but I honestly think like at that point of the game where he made some of those good throws, I bet Washington was just like keep the ball in the yard, play, don't give up a huge play and give up whatever underneath
Yeah.
stuff with Will Levis. But also, I think you're right.
Yeah,
He did play well that game. He fit the ball into tight windows and he threw a couple darts. But you also got to remember, I mean, in week one of the worst decisions I've ever seen to against the Bears, and that ended up losing them the game. I saw him play a full game of football against the Jets. It was terrible. I don't know what he was thinking. I mean, his IQ is pretty bad regardless
actually,
of what his arm looks
mhm,
like, because
yeah,
against the Jets, I mean, he had one of the worst fumbles you'll ever see. I mean, just hold the ball and take a sack. Instead, he tries to do way too much. Jets end up recovering it in the red zone. The Titans would have won the game if they scored on that possession, and they didn't. Will Levis just being careless with the football. I just don't think his football IQ is good enough. I think he has arm potential, but that doesn't go very far. We saw Zach Wilson, who had tons of arm potential, and look where that went him.
alright,
Got
how
him. He
about
couldn't
this?
read a defense, and he couldn't. I
Mhm,
mean,
yeah.
yeah.
No, you
Uh,
make a great point. I think there's a great way to describe how he plays. Raw talent. He has raw talent in terms of arm strength, accuracy. can chuck the ball downfield. His IQ sucks.
I just don't
And
think he's gonna ever develop because of
and I
that.
think all the good things I said were also mainly focused on his game against Washington because that's
Right.
practically the only Titans game I've watched all season, and in that game, he did look solid. And as you mentioned, Tony Pollard has 87 scrimmage yards per game and has 4 total touchdowns this season. Nick Westbrook-Akine, it's kind of been
He's been
his
on fire.
game the past few, weeks. He has 8 touchdowns in his past 8 games. So yeah, I do have Mac Jones playing a pretty terrible game this week and Tennessee picking up the win. I think it'll be close mainly because I don't think any team's really gonna be able to
Yeah, no
score that much in
run
this game.
away, right.
Yeah, so I do have Jacksonville covering the spread still, keeping it within 3 points, I guess, but it's not gonna be a
Either
great game
way.
either way.
Yeah, either way, right.
Yeah. But, of course, I do have the Tennessee victory there. Moving over, Falcons at Vikings. Vikings 5.5 point favorites. They're 10-2 on the year. Falcons are 6-6. Stephon Gilmore is out with a hamstring injury for Minnesota. This is the Kirk Cousins revenge game. But to be honest,
Mm.
there's not much that he can do in my opinion because he is a pretty terrible quarterback. I have him in a fantasy league where if I win this week, I make the playoffs. If I lose, I probably miss the playoffs. And I
Mhm.
picked up Caleb Williams instead of Kirk Cousins earlier. Kirk Cousins was my starter. Picked up Caleb Williams to play over him because I can't have a guy who goes out there and throws 4 interceptions.
Did you play Kirk Cousins the week where he dropped, what, 500 yards?
I did. Yeah.
Oh, great. Then you get your money's worth. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's about what
I
you can
play.
expect out of Kirk Cousins. We talked about it all season long, how pretty bad he's been outside of 2 games, and we really at the beginning of when we started the show, it was sort of like, "Oh, which week is he gonna have?" Could be either way. At this point, Matt, we're both sitting here, and it's sorta like there's like a 80-20 chance he's just like a bottom
Yeah.
5 quarterback in the league this week, and then there's like the outside chance where he, absolutely balls out and the team plays
But
great
again,
and scores
he's not
50.
playing the Buccaneers, so it's like,
So
yeah.
then all bets are off. Okay.
Yeah, but I
Um,
mean, in general, I really don't like the Falcons' odds in this one. The
mhm,
Vikings allow just 81 rushing yards per game, which is the fewest in the NFL, considering that the Falcons' one bright spot, I guess, when the passing game isn't working, is Bijan Robinson. If he gets shut down in this game, then that's going to be really, really concerning for Atlanta. Minnesota has won 5 straight games. Sam Darnold in his past 3 games has averaged 270 passing yards and has thrown 2 touchdowns in each of the games with 0 interceptions. Justin Jefferson averages 87 receiving yards per game to go along with 5 total touchdowns on the year. Jordan Addison in his past 3 games has averaged 92 receiving yards to go along with 2 touchdowns, and Aaron Jones has averaged 93 scrimmage yards per game as well as 5 total touchdowns. Darnold has a lot of weapons. That's the one thing you can take away from everything I just said.
mhm.
Darnold has a lot of weapons, and this isn't anything that we don't already know, but Atlanta is an extremely fraudulent team, and Minnesota is not. The Falcons have lost 3 straight games leading up to this matchup, and I see the Vikings easily picking up a double digit victory, potentially winning by 20 plus points. Because I really don't think that the Falcons are good whatsoever. And we saw a team like the Texans that they're kind of the same as the Falcons, I
Mhm.
guess. They're not great. They're they're solid, not great. They're a very fraudulent team, if you ask me. They lost by
I
27 to they lost by 27 to the Vikings earlier.
Yeah, I wouldn't
Like,
I wouldn't put the
I'd say
Falcons and the Texans
no,
in the same category. They have
I'd
way too
say
the Texans have more
here's the
potential, a
thing,
lot
I'd say
more.
that the Texans are better, and that just helps me prove my point. I'm
Right.
saying that the Falcons are worse and the Texans lost by 27. What's
Mhm.
keeping the Falcons from easily losing by 20 plus? Give me Minnesota in this one.
I think you're right. Kirk Cousins really just hasn't been good. It's hard to win football games, and when your quarterback has been as bad as he was. The four
Mhm.
interception game against Los Angeles last week. I mean, absolutely terrible. He chucked up a pick six to a dude. I mean, I don't know if he was aiming for white jerseys that game, but I'll tell you what, the Falcons, they can't win football games when Kirk
No.
Cousins plays like that. Big reason why they're at 6-6 right now. And it's kind of crazy to think how bad that NFC South is. That they're still what I mean, looking at NFL.com, there's still a 30% chance that they're going to win their division, which is, I mean, just crazy. But let's think about this from
Mhm.
the Atlanta offense side of things.
Okay.
Minnesota has and the NFL's fifth best scoring defense in the league. And they're great against the run. You mentioned how they're the best, one of the best running teams, I think the best in the league right now. And then if you're going to go up with that and Atlanta's attack is going to be get the ball in Bijan's hands, I just think Minnesota's, at the linebacking level, they just dominate. I think they come up, they
Yeah.
hit hard, they make big plays all over the
Mhm.
place. When you look at this Atlanta schedule, you're talking about scoring 13 against the Chargers, losing by 4, getting blown out by the Broncos. That was never a close game. Losing by 3 to the Saints, who at that point had 2 wins on the year, and then your last win is going to come against a Dak Prescott list, at least for a half of football, Dallas Cowboys team led by Cooper Rush. So you really haven't been good since October 27th when you beat the Buccaneers by 5. That was your last good win. It's December 8th today. So yeah, Atlanta has. I mean, they've been on an absolute cold streak after starting off the season, pretty well. They hung in there with the Chiefs, which doesn't sound like has much today. You hung in there with the, I guess, Justin Fields Steelers, so also doesn't sound as much today. You hung in there with the bad Eagles. So when you look at the six wins, they're against good teams. The Steelers, I mean, you played close games against the Steelers, Chiefs, and Eagles, but those are different teams than what we're looking at today. Atlanta,
Mhm.
honestly, when you look at it, it it wouldn't be far off to say that at this point, the way they're playing, they should realistically be a 3-4 win team. And then there's also, I'm not going to sit here and act like there's not problems on Minnesota's side of things. They win by 1 to the Cardinals. They kick a game winner against the Bears. They Tennessee's able to keep it close with them. They put up in one of the worst football games, honestly, that's probably ever aired. They win 12-7 against Jacksonville. Ugly, ugly game. The Colts keep it close with them. They lose by 10 to the Rams. They lose to the Lions. So I'm not going to sit here and act like Minnesota doesn't have problems. It's just that the Falcons have a lot more. This is absolutely Minnesota's game to lose. I think right now, I mean, in a metaphoric sense, Minnesota's up 10-0 on the scoreboard before this game kicks off. I just think Atlanta's coming into this game. Uh, they haven't played well, as I mentioned, in multiple months. And Minnesota has problems, but they just have a lot less. The
Mhm.
Falcons have things to figure out. A question for you: do you think there's any chance that Michael Penix gets in this week? This not this week, but this
Oh,
season, based on how
no.
bad Kirk
Thi
Cousins is
this week, there's 1,000,000% a chance. Not
this
saying there
week.
not saying that he's 1,000,000% going to play. There's 1,000,000% a chance that he gets in this week. If Kirk Cousins starts the game
Well, there's always
and
a
he
chance.
I think
Like
that if
realistic chance? You think it's actually going to
no,
happen? Chance?
yeah, completely realistic chance.
Wow.
I
They paid
think
him
that
4 years, $100 million, and you're gonna bench him for a rookie after
he
13
threw
and a
4
half weeks?
he threw 4 interceptions last
I
game.
guess I guess you might
He's
wanna see what you
he's
have
the
out of Michael
reason
Penix.
he's the reason that his team loses when they lose, and if
Mm,
the Falcons get off to a bad start, if they get off to maybe down double
mhm.
digits within the first half, Penix is 1,000,000% coming in.
It's like
If
a third late third, early fourth change,
yeah,
maybe.
I think it might even be I think it might be early 3rd. It might be start of the half, depending on how they play. If Kirk Cousins goes
Start of
out
the
there
half.
and he throws maybe 2 interceptions in the first half, maybe even 1, and just if he even throws 1 interception and the Falcons offense just isn't doing anything,
Yeah, right. It's just a
I
matter
think
of
that Michael like, why not though? Because at this point, if you keep using Kirk Cousins, you're not gonna make the playoffs.
yeah, this is
So,
kind of a make it or break it game for Atlanta. If you
yeah,
fall to 6 and 7,
1,000,000%.
I mean, your hopes at the division are already dwindling. You're right, Matt. They might have to hit the panic button right now,
And
but I think that's just a hard
mhm,
move to make when you're paying Kirk Cousins that much,
yeah,
regardless of what his play looks like. We're seeing it. I mean, we've seen it before where teams are just scared to bench the players that they pay too much. I mean, this is kind of a reach in baseball terms, but it happened a while ago with Giancarlo Stanton in the New York Yankees. They paid
mhm,
him so much money, and when all he did was strike out 2 years ago, they refused to bench him just because of how much money he was making. And I mean, and then you're going to pay him for 3 years to, sit there on the sidelines with the clipboard, Matt? Is Kirk Cousins' career possibly over? I mean, we could go down a serious rabbit hole with
yeah, I
this
mean
now that you're saying Penix can start this week. Not start, but play.
Yeah, and I was like, but no, I think that really anything's a possibility because Penix could go out there. Remember how Will Levis started his career? He got that chance and he looked amazing.
I can't say that I do. What?
Yeah, but Will Levis, I think it was last season, towards like the middle of the season, he got his first chance and he looked incredible. And people were saying, "Oh, Will Levis, Rookie of the Year. Will Levis is the next big thing."
Oh yeah,
If
I do
if
remember
we
that.
see that from Michael Penix, he's probably starting next week. If he gets a chance this week, he does that, he's starting next week because you can't. And the Bucks have one of the easiest schedules for the rest of the season.
Hmm.
So I think that the Bucks win at least 3 of their next 5 games to end the season. Atlanta basically has to not win out, but probably win,
They pretty much do.
yeah, like 3 or 4 games at the end of the season, and Kirk Cousins unfortunately isn't going to do that in my opinion. So yeah, I do think Penix is the option.
All right, let's move over to Panthers and Eagles. This one's in
Oh,
Philadelphia. When you
thanks.
look at these records, it's not going to tell you what this game is going to look like. This is a 3-9 Panthers team against a 10-2 Eagles. Hey, I've been riding high on the Panthers. I said they'd keep it close with the Chiefs. They lose in overtime to the Bucks. They beat the Giants. They're coming off of 3 good games, at least for their,
Mhm.
what they expected at the end of this game. Sorry, Panthers fans. This is the week where I break off from you. The Eagles are going to fly, Eagles fly, all over you, swoop through the Panther nest. And because this Eagles team, I mean, when was the last time they lost? I'm looking up and down their schedule. Their last loss was September 29th. So that'll tell you a lot. This Eagles team is the hottest in football. Nobody can stop them right now. They just ran right through the Ravens last week. And Panthers, I know you kept it close. I like what I've been seeing out of the offense, especially for a 3-9 football team. But this is the Eagles' week. There's not much else to say except they're the team with Saquon Barkley, and the Panthers aren't. So, uh, Eagles by 20.
That's fair because honestly, Saquon has kind of been he's been the Eagles this season. He's been basically the entire team. Not to say Jalen Hurts hasn't been good without him. I mean, Jalen Hurts has 10 rushing touchdowns in his past 7 games, and he's connected with A.J. Brown really well. A.J. Brown averages 88 receiving yards per game this season. But I mean, you look at Saquon and he's just doing
Magical
everything.
stuff.
It's insane. It's insane. 147 scrimmage yards per game to go along with 13 total touchdowns. Any word you could use, magical is an understatement. Any word you use is an understatement to describe how good he's being this season. And the Panthers are just atrocious. I mean, 187, they allow 100, average 187 passing yards per game, which is the fourth fewest in the NFL. They allow 167 rushing yards per game, which is the most in the NFL. Just to say that again, the
I
Panthers
just
allowed the Panthers allow the most rushing yards per game in the NFL. This is gonna get ugly. This is going to get extraordinarily ugly. Obviously, the Panthers allow 100 or 31 points per game, which is the most in the NFL, and average 18 points per game, which is the third fewest in the NFL. Eagles average 189 rushing yards per game, which is the most in the NFL, and Philly allows just 178 passing yards per game, which is the third fewest in the NFL. This is lopsided no matter how you look at it. And I mean, how do you not have the Eagles winning this one? I have
I,
double digits as well. I think that maybe after like quarter one, you think Carolina has a chance. Maybe they finish quarter one tied up like 7-7 or something. But no, I could totally see this being a 20 plus point victory for Philly, like you said.
yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if the Eagles went out there and scored 5 touchdowns. I mean, 35 points doesn't seem ridiculous for how great this Eagles team has been playing recently. And then the Panthers side of things, their defense is their weak side, and that matches up perfectly for the Eagles because their offense has been their strong suit in this winning streak. But also, I do want to touch on, some of those stats that you brought up about, the Panthers average the least amount of passing yards in the NFL. But That's I feel like they've just been playing a lot better. I mean, it's not fair to look at the
Yeah.
opening part of their season when they lose 47-10 to the Saints and they lose 26-3 to the Chargers and they lose, you know, 36-10 to the Bears and 40-7 to the Commanders. And, you know, this is not that is not the same Panthers team that we're seeing right now. So yeah, Bryce Young started off the year horrible. The team was terrible. I mean, I'm not gonna say they have completely turned things around and they're certainly on the rise, but they've turned around from where they were projected to be at the number one pick spot. They've turned things around at least a little bit. So while I do think the Eagles um, will probably win in a blowout win, that's not to say that the Panthers won't have a horrible day offensively. I just think it's just going to be a defensive meltdown for them, honestly. And if I had to take a score prediction, I'll shoot out 35-10 as my final.
That's fair. I mean, I think the point that I was getting when I said that is no matter who's quarterback, whether it's Bryce Young, when how he was playing to start the season, whether it's Andy Dalton when he was playing terrible in the middle of the season, whether it's Bryce Young who's playing slightly better now, they have nothing against Philly.
Yep, agreed.
Nothing. And no matter what they do, no matter what they throw at them, it's not enough.
Mhm.
That's the simple way to put it. Moving over to the next game though. Raiders at Buccaneers. Buccaneers 6.5 point favorites. They're 6-6 on the year. Raiders are 2-10. I don't have too much on this game. The Raiders average 78 rushing yards per game, which is the fewest in the NFL, and they have 23 total turnovers on the year, which is the most in the NFL. Rashad White has been on a roll recently. 6 total touchdowns in his last 6 games. Tampa Bay is 2-0 with Mike Evans back in those 2 games. Evans has averaged 93 receiving yards and 1 total touchdown. Pretty simple. Bucks pick up another win, and honestly take control of the NFC South at this point. I don't see a situation where if the Bucks win this game and the Falcons lose this game, I don't think that there's a situation where
Mhm.
the Bucks really lose the division at all. But yeah, Tampa Bay covers the spread as well, winning by at least a touchdown.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. There's not much to say. Tampa Bay, Las Vegas. I'll take the Buccaneers
Mhm.
just because of how bad Las Vegas has been. I mean, we talk about it every week how they just can't win. Um,
And
yeah,
and
there's really
Gardner
not.
Minshew's not playing for them, obviously. Not that
Yeah,
he makes a
done for the
massive
season.
difference. Not that he makes a massive difference, but it's like
Mm,
Aiden O'Connell,
It's just
it doesn't matter.
yeah.
It's
I
a
just think Tampa
pretty
Bay.
terrible thing.
Yeah, we've seen strides from Bucky Irving definitely as a rookie, especially last week where I think he exceeded the 150 yards mark
Yeah.
and he also found the end zone. He's just been on fire for Tampa Bay. I'm not sure what their split is going to look like today with Rashad White, and I think that's going to be very interesting to see how Tampa Bay moves forward at the running back department. Just because of how well Bucky Irving's played, but you also have this veteran that's proved what he can do in a Bucks uniform, and so that's going to be a very interesting decision for Todd Bowles and his coaching staff of what do you do with the running back department. But regardless of what you do there, Baker Mayfield will find Mike Evans. That offense can ball out, especially against a no good Las Vegas defense. There's really not anything, just about nothing to like for Las Vegas.
Mhm.
And Tampa Bay has potential, right? We saw it when they played the Saints. We saw it when they played, the Falcons, excuse me, even though they didn't win that one. They have the potential to go out
Yeah.
there and score 30 plus. Las
Mhm.
Vegas has the potential to go out there and score less than a touchdown. So while this game's probably going to be pretty boring, I have the Bucks, and there's not a better way to say it than the Raiders are just probably the worst. I mean, I'd probably give it to the Giants right now, but the Raiders are just such a bad team. I don't think I can pick them against a playoff
They're
contending team.
they're equally bad. They're both in the same boat. I mean, their season's over. It's
Hmm.
it's a disgrace for both teams. Bucky Irving has had 80 plus scrimmage yards in 5 of his last 7 games, and
That's
in
nice.
those 7 games, he has one, two, three, 5 touchdowns. You take Rashad White out of the equation, you take Mike Evans out of the equation. Bucky Irving by himself could beat this Raiders team. If you just had Baker Mayfield handing the ball off to Bucky Irving with how he's playing right now, he beats Las Vegas. this game's not close, and
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
think you would agree with that.
Yeah, let's move over to
Mhm.
a divisional matchup. This one with a lot of playoff implications. A 7-5 Seattle team visits the 6-6 Arizona Cardinals. It's in the desert in Arizona. So let me set the stage. If Arizona wins this game, they go to
Mhm.
7-6, and then that would drop Seattle to also to 7-6. So that would even up the playing field atop the division. Seattle can take a two-game lead in the division with a win. That would improve them all the way up to 8-5. They have been on a roll recently. They just beat the Cardinals 2 weeks ago. That one was in Seattle. In what was honestly, pretty convincing win. The Cardinals showed no signs of life offensively, 16-6. And what I will tell you about the Seahawks when I watched them against the Jets last week is that their defense can make big plays. They can get off the field on third down. You saw that Leonard Williams pick six, and I think that they also in that Arizona game they had another 69-yard pick six. So it's been their defense that springboarded their offense into a good position. And you also have to remember that they beat the 49ers 3 weeks ago. So they're coming in off a 3-game winning streak with the motivation to basically, I'm not going to say lock up the division, but take a huge step in the right direction and probably set themselves up perfectly as we go down the stretch of the season here. I think the motivation is just enough for Seattle to go out here firing, beat an Arizona team. But the big thing is for the Cardinals that the Seahawks are going to be missing Kenneth Walker in this game. He is out against the Cardinals with a calf injury. So the big thing for Arizona is to take that and just dominate Seattle in the run game. I'm talking ground and pound to James Conner. You can incorporate Trey McBride and Marvin Harrison, who's been progressing certainly. But I think Kyler Murray and just the running back duo, I think the ground game goes to Arizona, the air game goes to Seattle. Seattle's defense makes big plays. The Seahawks take a 2-game lead in their division and basically wrap up the
Mhm.
NFC West for the season.
Yeah, I mean, the Seahawks average 250 passing yards per game, which is the second most in the NFL. Geno Smith isn't necessarily a consistent or reliable quarterback, but he is always going to get a lot of passing yards. Uh,
Mhm.
Speaking of Geno Smith, he has under 200 passing yards just one time in his 12 games so far this season, which is really, really impressive on his end. And then obviously you mentioned Kenneth Walker will be out, but Zach Charbonnet has 6 touchdowns in 12 games this season. I think he'll be just fine as the Seahawks RB1. Metcalf averages 76 receiving yards per game. JSN averages 105 scrimmage yards per game
Yep.
in his past 5 games and has 3 touchdowns in that stretch. He's been on an absolute tear. I do have the Seahawks upsetting the Cardinals. I know it's not really an upset. I think a lot of people would consider, but the Cardinals are favorites in this one by 2.5. So Seahawks do upset the Cardinals on the road, advance to 8-5, as you mentioned, probably clutch up the division if they do end up winning this game. And real quick, can we do a little intermission so I can read off the college football playoffs that were just announced?
Oh my. Sure. Let's get
Yeah,
game
so
of
we have Clemson versus Texas in the first round, Tennessee versus Ohio State, SMU versus Penn State, and Indiana versus Notre Dame in the first round. And then for buys, we have Arizona State, Oregon, Boise State, and Georgia. Those are
Yep.
that is your college football playoffs right there.
I mean I'm kind of shocked that Bama got left out, but I'm just as a South Carolina fan, I just can't believe it.
I haven't really been
Ah,
following them that much
man.
this season. How close were they to making it?
All right, here's what it is, Matt.
Yeah.
They lost on a terrible call to
Mhm.
LSU. They had a pick six at the end of the game that was nullified. They probably would have won that game. That would have made them a 10-2 football team. They're coming in at 9-3 as the hottest team in the nation. They've won 6 straight games, 5 of them against ranked opponents. They just upset number 15 Clemson on the road. They were actually number like 12 at the time. Upset Clemson on the road in the Palmetto Bowl. They have been, I mean, the teams they've beaten and they're two out of their 3 losses were to LSU and Alabama by a combined 5 points. And their other loss was to Ole Miss, which was a blowout. But boy, They were so close. I think they're gonna finish as the 3rd team out probably. It's gonna go Bama out, Miami out, South Carolina out. But regardless, they are the hottest team in the nation, but it just shows you that the college football committee cares more about head-to-head record and the loss column more than they do about how that team is doing coming into things. But I mean, it's so hard to pick because of how different conferences are, like the ACC compared to the SEC. The competition there is just so I mean, it's just like the USFL versus the NFL. I know that's probably a bad comparison, but there are just so many better teams in the SEC. But I'll admit it; those guys have such a hard job to pick who's in. But yeah, thanks for the intermission. And
Mhm. Yeah.
I don't think we should do predictions right now. But if I
No,
had to put it
but,
out there, Oregon looks great right now. That's what I'll
mhm.
say.
I'm not the biggest college football fan.
Hmm.
I have my team that I root for. Other than that, I don't follow it like a crazy amount. Now, one thing I will say is that I'm extremely excited to watch Boise State, obviously, with Ashton Jeanty.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, you can play Nevada and you can play Utah State every single week,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
they had an absolute, you know, crazy matchup between with them and Oregon earlier this season. So watching them in the playoffs should be really exciting, honestly. And I think just watching JT take over should be extremely interesting.
Yeah, he's my Heisman pick right now. I
It's
just
hard
don't
not
think.
to.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
him.
it is.
It's obviously him or Travis Hunter.
Yep.
I'd probably have JT too.
But it's
He's
kind of hard
been
to pick against a guy that plays both ways. But I
yeah
think, but,
yeah
but, but Boise State's game plan is give it to Genty and see what he
yeah.
can do. So it's hard to pick against that.
I mean, he's had his historic season.
Absolutely.
We
Yep.
see good performances from, like, Chase Brown, for instance, in, college, maybe Najee Harris, Travis Etienne. Nothing has come even close to what
Yeah.
JT has done so far this year. He's put on a master class, to say the least.
Completely agree, Matt.
Mhm. Now moving over to the next game, we got Bears at 49ers. 49ers, 3.5 point favorites. They're 5-7. Bears are 4-8. Now, here's the thing, it's the Bears' first game without Matt Eberflus, who is basically their number one enemy at this point. Uh, felt like he was kind of rooting,
He's right behind the
for
Packers.
felt like he was kinda rooting for, Lions win last week. Maybe he made a bet, put some money on the Lions. Definitely a possibility there. But here's the thing, the 49ers are dealing with lots of injuries. Nick Bosa is doubtful. CMC and Jordan Mason are both on IR. And Caleb Williams in his past 2 games has averaged 298 passing yards to go along with 5 total touchdowns and 0 interceptions. DeAndre Swift averages 85 scrimmage yards per game this season with 5 rushing touchdowns. Keenan Allen has averaged 80 receiving yards per game in his past 2 games. He also has 3 touchdowns in those 2 games. And DJ Moore has averaged 94 receiving yards in his past 3 games, including 2 touchdowns throughout that span. At this point, Caleb Williams has more weapons than Brock Purdy, and it's not even close. Ayuk's out for the season. Purdy has Kittle and Debo in this game,
Yep.
and Williams has DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen, DeAndre Swift. I mean, the Bears at this point are probably a better team. San Francisco has lost 3 straight. Now, I understand you could just say, "Oh, the Bears have lost 6 straight," right? Whatever. But here's the thing, they've gotten extremely unlucky. They lost to Detroit because of terrible coaching, obviously, Matt Eberflus not calling a timeout. The week
Yep.
before that, they lost to the Vikings on a game-winning field goal. The week before that, they got their potential game-winning field goal blocked by the Packers. And then 6 weeks ago, they lost because of the Commanders' Hail Mary. Realistically, they should have gone at least 3-3 in their past 6 games, and if they went 3-3 in their past 6 games, they'd have a record of 7-5. They've gotten extremely unlucky, and they should be in playoff contention right now. I don't think Chicago's actually that bad of a team. I do have them picking up the victory over San Fran on the road and ending their losing streak.
Yeah, Matt, you touched on a lot of great points there, but let me just hammer home some of them. Number one, San Francisco's injury report. You're talking about both starting running backs, uh, Jordan Mason, excuse me, Christian McCaffrey are both out. That means Isaac Guerno is going to play like a running
Mhm.
back one. What does that mean? I mean, obviously, you talk about the 49ers' great offensive line might be able to help them, not without Trent Williams and Aaron Banks, two out of their starting five, and probably the best two on that line are not in this game. And then let's get to the defensive side of things. We haven't even talked about Nick Bosa, Dre Greenlaw,
Mhm.
George Odom, the safety. Those guys are all out as well. So, I mean, the 49ers they're just turning into a extended injury list, and it's really unfortunate for them coming off that NFC title run last year, where they had a magical run. They just barely lost in the Super Bowl, but now they're sitting at 5-7. And I agree with you. This is a Chicago team that under interim head coach Thomas Brown, I feel like they're just going to get a little bit of a
Yeah.
lift. Sort of what we saw with the Saints when Darren Rizzi took over. It was just, there was energy back in the building. I feel like everywhere around New Orleans football team just felt a little bit better about themselves with a coaching change. And I think what a coaching change says is that, guys, it's no longer on the coaches. Go play for yourselves, right? Uh, you know, go play for the Chicago Bears. Don't go play for Matt Eberflus. And I think that provides a bit of a spark
Mhm.
to a Chicago team that's been missing it recently. And despite how well they've played, I it's got to feel terrible to come out on the losing end of that many games, right? You mentioned all
Yeah.
of them, and then that. I mean, how do you not call a timeout? I mean, they could pay me a whole lot of money, even I know, to call a timeout there. And the fact that he didn't even admit it in the press conference, he said like, "Oh, we had a game plan for it or something." Um, yeah, that was pretty bad. Obviously, he deserved to be fired, and it just came, I think, the next day after. So certainly not a good look for Chicago, but I do think they get a spark and pick up a field goal victory in San Fran.
Yeah, now we have Timothy Park in the chat. I feel for every Jets fan. I know how it feels as a Commanders fan. Yeah, I mean, you would know best right now. It's terrible.
It's so bad. But
Mhm.
I mean, yeah. There's so
Mhm.
much uncertainty and they haven't been good my entire life. So yeah, there's a lot wrong with that team, but there's not a lot wrong with the Buffalo Bills. So let's go to them.
Yeah.
They play in Los Angeles against the 6-6 Rams. Talked about the Eagles being one of the hottest teams in the league. So are the Bills, 10-2. I am taking the Bills in this one, despite Los Angeles potentially being able to keep it close. Maybe a big game from the wide receiving room. Puka Nakua, Matthew Stafford should be able to connect with him and Cooper Cup, as well as Kyron Williams in the backfield. So Los Angeles, it's not like they have a bad offense, but we've just seen domination in northern New York from the Bills.
Mhm.
They've beaten the Chiefs, the 49ers in back-to-back weeks, and then their last week was way back on October 6th when they lost by 3 to the Texans. So they've been on an absolute roll. It's just been great football over the past 3 months for Buffalo. They're a I mean, I think the simplest way to put this is just how well Josh Allen's been playing. He hasn't been turning the ball over like we've seen in previous years. He's
Mhm.
catching touchdowns, which is debatable. I guess we talked about it a lot last week on how we disagreed with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the Rams have the ability to keep this close, but give me the Bills by double digits. Probably, if I had to say, 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, you don't need to do like a whole build up for this one. I have the Bills as well, and I think that the Bills are easily the best team in the AFC, maybe the entire NFL. I do think Los Angeles can keep it close, but Bills ultimately end up winning, bumping their record up to 11-2. With a loss today, the Rams are most likely out of the playoffs completely. James Cook averages 75 scrimmage yards per game this season and has 12 total touchdowns in 11 games. He's been amazing. And then Josh Allen, as you mentioned, has had an incredible season coming off that receiving, rushing, passing touchdown game. Yeah, I mean, whatever you want to call it. Bills averaged 30 points per game this season, which is the second most in the NFL, and they are on a 7-game win streak and have scored 30 plus in their past 6 games. I don't think I think that the game itself could be close, but no matter how close the game is, the winner is already decided in my mind, and that's Buffalo. Now, we will move over to, I believe it's our no, we have 2 more games. I was gonna say our final game.
Yep.
This is the Sunday night, then we have the Monday night. We're gonna need to hurry these up, though. We're,
Yeah.
8 minutes 8 minutes away from game time. Of course, we want to be able to watch those games, so we'll go quick. Chargers at Chiefs. Chiefs, 4-point favorites. They're 11-1. Chargers are 8-4. Chiefs allow just 88 rushing yards per game, which is the third fewest in the NFL. Mahomes in his last two games has averaged 288 passing yards and two touchdowns with zero interceptions. Kelsey has averaged 63 receiving yards in his past 9 games, and Kareem Hunt has averaged 81 scrimmage yards as the Chiefs this season. He will obviously be splitting touches with Isaiah Pacheco in this one. Noah Gray has 4 touchdowns in his past 3 games. This is a crucial divisional matchup for Kansas City, and I know that Mahomes is going to step up at home when it matters most. The Chargers are going to keep it close. I really do like the Chargers this season, but I don't think they quite have what it takes to beat Kansas City in this one.
Yeah, despite being 4-point favorites, give me the Chargers. The Chiefs can't keep winning
Oh,
these
okay.
extremely close games. I really like what Justin Herbert's been able to do. Their running game has been much improved. Kansas City's defense has been their bright spot. They've gotten lucky multiple times in a row. They're coming off a pretty bad game on Black Friday. Matt, you're right. We do kind of have to hurry up. I'll take the Chargers by a field goal in this one. It's going to be very close. I think that's certainly the game of the week on Sunday Night Football.
Yeah.
They did the right thing there, Chiefs Chargers. At the start of the year, I would have said Chiefs by 2 touchdowns, but I'll take the Chargers right now by a field goal just because of how shaky the Chiefs have looked down the stretch. Let's move to Monday Night Football, final game, prime time. These when you look at the records, you might say Dallas has a chance. They don't.
No, they don't.
This is going to be the Jamar Chase. I think this is going to be just the Chase show. That's both Chase Brown and Jamar
Yeah,
Chase.
Chase
If you're
Brown.
wondering,
Yeah.
this is going to be the Chase show for Cincinnati, and Dallas will be a part of the chase show, but they'll be chasing the scoreboard. They'll be chasing the
Mhm.
Bengals lead because I think Cincinnati jumps out to an early lead here. Joe Burrow gets whatever he wants against a Cowboys offense that just can't match what Cincinnati has. The firepower all over the place. I'm expecting a big 2-touchdown day for Jamar Chase. So give me the Bengals on Monday Night Football. It's unfortunate, how they've taken a lot of bad losses because of how bad their defense has played, but they get back in the win column, even if it means it's not the playoffs. Cincinnati does pick up the win in Dallas.
Yeah, I mean, I have Cincinnati in this one too, and they have a worse record. They're still 5-point favorites. Zach
Yeah.
Martin is out in this game. Cincinnati, they've lost. I had this written down somewhere. They've lost, yeah, 7 of their 8 losses have been one possession this season.
Mm.
So they've gotten extremely unlucky in that aspect. It's hard to say that Cincinnati's actually a worse team than Dallas, though.
Yeah.
Dallas has a terrible run defense. They have a terrible run offense as well. Bengals pass for the most yards per game, and Joe Burrow has averaged 364 passing yards in his last 3 games. In his past 4 games, he has a total of 15 touchdowns. Chase Brown, as you mentioned, Jamar Chase, as you mentioned, uh, the Chase duo there is going to be really, really, really good. Chase Brown has 8 touchdowns in his past 9 games. Jamar Chase, you don't even have to explain what he's done, but he's averaged 95 receiving yards per game this season and 13 receiving touchdowns, including 6 in his past 3 games. T. Higgins averaged 92 receiving yards in his past 5 games and his 5 touchdowns throughout that stretch. Give me Cincinnati in this one, taking care of business on the road. And in the chat, Bengals figure out how to lose every single game. They do. I don't see that happening in this one. Dallas is just a really rough team. I think a lot of the games where they lose are
It's
actual
just
good
been the defense.
competition. And I also think it's good competition. 2 of those have
Yeah,
come against the Ravens, 1 has come against the Chiefs, and it's just been, we're a team that can compete with these good teams, but we can't execute. They're not gonna have a problem executing if they jump off to an early win or a early lead in this one, which I think they will.
agreed.
Yeah, now with that being said, we are going to have to wrap things up. Can't thank you enough for coming on. For everyone who made it up to this point, again, can't thank you enough for watching. Make sure you also tune into our Week 14 recap show, probably taking place sometime tomorrow afternoon. We will let you know as we get closer. In that, we are going to break down everything that happened during Week 14 of the NFL season. Obviously,
Mhm.
looking forward to seeing you guys there. Again, I'm Matthew Heiserman alongside Josh Wolver for your Week 14 Highlight Haven NFL Tailgate show. And as always, we will see you next time.